We go from 2018 to 2020. Potential presidential candidates are making moves to position themselves for what's expected to be a crowded race. Some of those potential candidates gathered in Washington Tuesday for the annual Center for American Progress Ideas Conference. As Democrats try to figure out what their party stands for, they're also trying to figure out what to do about President Trump. The president is seeing his highest job approval rating so far this year. The latest CBS News poll has it standing at 40%. Here's what some big names said about the president on Tuesday.
While I give people that moment to wallow in what's happening right now, I don't have time to wallow. We need to move forward, and the way you move forward is emphasizing these economic issues.
So it doesn't matter to me if the president says 80 bizarre things or 800. Every single time, we just have to call him out on it, and that's my view. And at the end of the day, I think we absolutely need to stand up to his bullying.
What President Trump stands for undermines everything we value, whether you care about women's rights or LGBTQ equality or clean air, clean water. Literally everything we care about is at risk with this president.
We must not allow Donald Trump or anyone else to divide us up, because when we stand together as one people, united, fighting for a progressive agenda, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish.
In 2016, nearly 3 million more people voted for Hillary Clinton than for Donald Trump. But Trump took the presidency. That is not exactly the sign of a healthy democracy.
CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe was at the conference, and he joins me now from Washington. Well, Ed, it does not seem like there is consensus on what the strategy should be regarding President Trump ahead of midterms. You spoke with one particularly vulnerable Democrat, Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio. Here's what he said about what it means to be a Democrat now.
It means it's only whose side are you on, and you fight for the little guy, whether she punches a time clock or whether he works construction, whether she is working in manufacturing or whether he's working in an office. And I see everything through that. I will make the contrast in a political campaign as between whose side are you on in the end? Do you fight for workers? Do you fight for health care? Or do you do the bidding of corporate lobbyists and the drug companies and Wall Street and the companies that outsource jobs? It's a pretty simple equation.
So Senator Brown seems to be focused less on President Trump. Does that mean Ohio voters are also less focused on him?
Not necessarily, and he actually said that, when there are questions about the president, it's more on issues regarding NAFTA or trade generally or the economy, and less on the Russia investigation and the problems that are swirling around the White House. And that's nearly uniform, actually, when you talk to congressional candidates who are Democrats across the country. They say, I don't get asked about Russia. I don't get asked about the Mueller investigation. People are aware of it. They know what's going on, but they also kind of get a sense that me as a member of Congress can't necessarily do anything about it until there are results. And on the flip side, I've seen congressional candidates like Sherrod Brown get asked questions, should the president be impeached? And they say, well, we can't weigh in on that necessarily until those investigations are over. So in the absence of that, folks like Sherrod Brown, who are running in states where the president prevailed, and prevailed big time in 2016, realize that they've got to focus more on issues, potential places where they agree with the president, and areas where they disagree with the president. Later in the day, the senator on stage at this event was pointing out that, when there are times that I disagree with him or feel the need to call him out, I will. He called out the fact that the president this week seems more interested in helping that Chinese telecom, ZTE, and did not take to task the CEO of General Motors last week when he was hosting auto executives at the White House, and didn't take an opportunity to call out the fact that GM has just laid off a few thousand, I think it was, workers in the Youngstown, Ohio area. And Brown said, there was an opportunity for the president to, take a step on behalf of my state, and he didn't do it, and I feel the need to call him out for that, and suggest that he's being hypocritical in supporting a Chinese company instead of American workers.
Interesting. Well, Ed, was there any consensus on how Democrats nationally should focus on what they should focus on in midterm races?
Not necessarily, but you did hear a lot today about the need to focus on economic growth and making sure that the entire country, lower income, middle class earners, in addition to upper income earners, are sort of benefiting from the ongoing economic growth. And how exactly that gets discussed, it's done a little differently by each of the speakers. There were some who focus on sort of the need to make sure that there's opportunity for everybody. Others who just say, there should be a fair shake. You heard Sherrod Brown talk about fairness for the little guy. And but all of them, I think, understand that issues regarding the economy, preserving the healthcare system as it currently exists, and making sure Republicans can't chip away anymore at the Affordable Care Act, those kinds of issues are also what they want to focus on. And some concern or desire to roll back some of the tax reform that was enacted by Republicans. Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, saying that should be totally torn up. Others suggested there are elements of it that should be rolled back should Democrats get back control of Congress.
Well, are potential presidential candidates paying much attention to that race in Ohio?
They should. If you talk to Democratic consultants and others who are familiar with the party's issues, they say, look, it's a red state, at least at the presidential level it was. Brown is the only statewide Democrat in Ohio right now. If he is able to present a mostly economic message and is able to hold on and sort of that focus on the little guy as he talked about, then that is potentially a prescription for success not only in a state like Ohio, but potentially again in Pennsylvania and Michigan, Wisconsin, places where the party struggled. And similarly, potentially in other swing states or other parts of the country that could be competitive. Just the idea that they're focused on fairness and making sure that the country's economic policy is benefiting everybody. So, yeah, there are a lot of folks out there who look at the Sherrod Brown model and say, if he can do it there, we should consider emulating that, or maybe he should consider running for president himself.
Okay. Well, and who goes to this particular conference, and what were some of the specific ideas being floated?
You saw a lot of conversation about issues of concern, certainly to liberals. You saw a lot of conversation about women's rights, gay rights, climate change, gun control, economic fairness, and concerns with democracy and the rule of law, and the idea that the administration currently may be trying to sort of chip away at those things. Elizabeth Warren talked about that, so did Bernie Sanders. Washington State Governor Jay Inslee talked a lot about climate change, an issue that he's taken on as a signature part of his platform. You saw Chris Murphy, the senator from Connecticut, in an exchange with other activists regarding gun control, an issue that's very important to him in his state, given the Sandy Hook massacre back in 2012. And then earlier today, discussion of economic empowerment from Sherrod Brown, from Julian Castro, the former HUD secretary, and women's rights, of course, a signature issue for Kirsten Gillibrand, the junior senator from New York, who is among those talked about as a potential candidate, as for a presidential candidate. As for who attends these things, you'd think it was liberal activists and grassroots leaders from across the country, but no. At this specific event, it's mostly donors, frankly, to the Center for American Progress, a large liberal think tank here in Washington that was founded 15 years ago, and a lot of reporters, frankly. We see this as an opportunity to get an early sense of what people who are thinking about running for president might look like, might sound like, what they might talk about, were they to eventually head to New Hampshire and Iowa shortly after the elections in November. The one who got closest to admitting he's thinking about this was Julian Castro, who in an interview with us said that he'll wait to see what the results are like in November and make a decision shortly thereafter. We should point out he's also planning to issue a book this fall. That's usually a sign that somebody's seriously considering a broader political run. But, everyone who spoke in one way or another, all of the elected officials, are the kind that see themselves either as potential presidential timber or somebody who would want to run for higher office in their state or end up in the next Democratic administration. And all of them, they're obviously trying to curry favor with folks who cut big checks, and also those of us, frankly, who monitor this stuff on a regular basis and try to get a sense of who's climbing the ranks of the party.
So, to follow up on that, of those at least 10 potential 2020 candidates who attended that conference, Ed, was there anyone in particular that you thought was received particularly well?
There wasn't necessarily a standout, but I will say that Senator Elizabeth Warren did something interesting at the end of the day, announcing that she's going to be donating six-figure sums to various organizations to help Democrats in the various states win back their state legislatures, understanding that that is key to redrawing congressional maps in a more favorable way, favorable at least to Democrats, if not to everyone overall. That was an interesting move. The other interesting move was from Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York, who announced that he's going to order up the NYPD to do a 30-day review of the city's marijuana policy. He realizing, I think, like many other Democrats, that perhaps there needs to be yet even more change in drug policy at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level, and he clearly trying to do what he can and score some points with liberals as he continues thinking about possibly running for president himself.
All right, Ed O'Keefe in Washington. Ed, I guess never too early to think about 2020.
Never too early.
Ed, thanks
902
so much.
days until Election Day 2020.
Who's
Mark your
counting?
calendars.
Right, exactly. Ed, thanks.
Take care.